The price of honor. The reports coming back to Earth painted a picture that President Kyung-soo had expected, but still hurt to see. Food rationing on 17 colonies, medical supplies running low on 43 more. Construction projects halted. Military expansion frozen. The human economy was being pushed to its breaking point. "We're spending ourselves into poverty," Senator Dong-hyun said during the emergency assembly session. He stood at the podium, his face hard. "For what? To save aliens who can't even save themselves? We have our own people suffering because of this mission." Murmurs of agreement rippled through some sections of the assembly. Not everyone was happy with the sacrifice. Some colonies had sent new representatives, people who thought the debt had been paid enough, that humanity should look after its own first. "My colony is rationing water," another senator added. "Water? We've had to delay expansion into the southern continent because we gave away our construction equipment to help build shelters on Nalith refugee worlds. Our children are going without so that alien children can have more." Kyung-soo listened to it all. He understood their frustration. He had seen the reports from his own eyes. Human worlds were suffering. There was no denying it. When the arguments finally died down, he stood and walked to the podium. The assembly fell silent. "You're right," he said simply. "This is costing us everything. Our economy is strained. Our people are making sacrifices. Some of our colonies are experiencing real hardship." He paused. "But let me tell you what we're buying with that sacrifice. 25 years ago, I was a child on a dying ship. I was 8 years old and I knew I was going to die. I understood it the way children understand terrible things, completely and without hope. Then 7 strangers in a broken freighter came and saved us. They had no reason to. We couldn't pay them. We couldn't offer them anything. They came because it was the right thing to do. Captain Bora could have ignored our distress call. She could have said her ship was too small, her crew too few, her cargo too valuable. She could have made all the logical arguments we're hearing today. Instead, she came. She risked everything for strangers. Now we have a choice. We can be logical. We can be practical. We can decide that we've done enough, that 3 billion Nalith lives aren't worth the cost to our own comfort. Or we can be the kind of people who remember, who honor their debts, who understand that some things matter more than money or convenience. If we forget this, if we let our own hardship turn us away from those who need us, then what are we? We become just like the Velcron Empire, powerful and rich and completely empty of anything that matters." Senator Dong-hyun stood again. "Beautiful words, Mr. President. But words don't feed hungry children. What do I tell my constituents when they ask why their rations are being cut?" Kyung-soo met his eyes. "You tell them the truth. You tell them that we're paying a debt to the only people who helped us when the mighty of the galaxy turned away. You tell them that being human means remembering, and you tell them that their sacrifices are saving 3 billion lives. That has to mean something." The vote was called. It was close this time, much closer than before. But it passed. The mission would continue. After the session, Kyung-soo sat alone in his office, feeling every one of his 53 years. His aide knocked softly and entered. "Sir, you have a message from Admiral J. Priority 1. Kyung-soo pulled up the communication. Jay's face appeared and she looked exhausted. "Mr. President, we have a problem. The Velcran sabotage is getting worse. We've lost 3 ships this week. Not to direct attacks, they're too smart for that now. But shipments go missing. Supplies are contaminated. Navigation data is corrupted. They're bleeding us slowly and there's nothing we can do about it without starting an actual war. How bad is it? At this rate? We'll get maybe 2.5 billion Nalith off-world before Nalitha Prime becomes uninhabitable. 500 million will die." Kyung-soo felt sick. 500 million people. More deaths than most wars. All because the Velcran Empire could not stand to see humans succeed. "What do you need?" he asked. "Honestly, a miracle. Or for the Velcrans to suddenly grow a conscience. I'll take either one." On Nalitha Prime, the situation was becoming desperate. With 3 months left, the evacuation was ahead of schedule in some areas and dangerously behind in others. The elderly and sick were being left to last, a practical decision that felt like murder to everyone involved. Elder Bora watched another transport lift off and felt her heart break. She had seen the reports. She knew that not everyone would be saved. The mathematics were brutal and clear. "Elder?" A young Nalith approached, one of the volunteers helping coordinate the evacuation. "The human captain wants to speak with you." Bora made her way slowly to the command center. Sun Hee was there, staring at holographic displays showing the progress of the evacuation. When she saw Bora, the young captain's professional mask slipped for just a moment and the elder saw the weight she was carrying. "Captain," Bora said softly, "you should not have to make these choices." "What choices?" Son, he asked, though she knew. "Who lives and who dies? You're organizing us by priority. The young first, the healthy, the ones most likely to survive. The old like me, the sick, the weak, we go last. If there's time." Bora smiled sadly. "It's logical. It's the right choice. But it's killing you inside to make it." Sun-Hee turned away and her shoulders shook. "I have nightmares about it. Every night, I see the faces of the people we're leaving behind. You're saving billions," Bora said gently. "That has to be enough, does it?" Sun-Hee's voice was raw. "What do I tell my grandfather's memory? That we saved most of the Nalith? That we did our best? He would have found a way to save everyone. Captain Hyunwoo would have found a way." "They were extraordinary people," Bora agreed. "But they were still people. Sometimes the impossible is truly impossible." Sun-Hee wiped her eyes and turned back. When she spoke again, her voice was steady. "Then we'll do the impossible anyway. That's what humans do." Across the galaxy, something unexpected was happening. The minor species, the ones ignored and dismissed by the great powers, were organizing. The Kalahari sent every medical ship they had. The Proxians donated fuel beyond what they could afford. The Drayan opened their worlds to refugees, even though they barely had room for their own people. On a Proxian station, representatives from 37 different species met in secret. They had no official authority, no military power, no wealth. But they had something else. They had hope. "The humans are showing us something," a Kalahari delegate said. "They're proving that the strong don't have to dominate. That power can be used for protection instead of conquest. The Velkrans are trying to make them fail," a Drayan added. "If the humans succeed, everything changes. The whole galaxy changes." "Then we have to help them succeed," said another voice. The meeting lasted for hours. When it ended, a message went out on encrypted channels to dozens of worlds. A new alliance was forming, one built not on fear or dominance but on the radical idea that cooperation was stronger than competition. The Coalition of Free Worlds was born. On Earth, Min-seok burst into Admiral J's office without knocking. "Admiral, you need to see this." He pulled up a star map showing ship movements near Naletha Prime. Dozens of new vessels were arriving, from species J barely recognized. Small trading ships, converted freighters, even some ancient colony vessels that looked like they should have been scrapped decades ago. "What is this?" Jay asked. "Help," Min-seok said, and he was grinning. "The minor species are sending everything they have. Food, medical supplies, transport capacity. It's not much from each world, but there are so many of them." Jay stared at the map and felt something loosen in her chest. They were not alone. The mission that had started as humans repaying a debt had become something larger. It had become a statement, a declaration that the old way of doing things was not the only way. On his throne on the Velkran homeworld, Emperor Vorthak read the intelligence reports and felt rage burning through him. The humans were succeeding despite his efforts. Worse, they were inspiring others. The minor species that the Empire had kept in their place for centuries were starting to unite. "Increase the sabotage operations," he ordered. "I want every human ship harassed. Every supply line disrupted. They must not succeed." His advisors exchanged worried glances but obeyed. The Emperor did not see or care about their concern. He only saw a challenge to his power that had to be crushed. But across the galaxy, in 1,000 small acts of courage and kindness, the foundations of his empire were beginning to crack. And at the center of it all, exhausted humans worked around the clock to save people who had once saved them. They did not do it for glory or power or profit. They did it because Captain Bora had come when no one else would. They did it because humans remember, and they would not stop until every last Nylith was safe, no matter what it cost. The world that had been home to the Nalith for all of recorded history became a B, the Galactic Reckoning. The news spread across the galaxy at the speed of light, carried by ships and communications networks that connected 1,000 worlds. Humanity had done the impossible. 3 billion Nalith evacuated, not a single soul left behind. The reaction was shock, followed by something the great powers had not expected, changes they could not control. In the Great Council chambers, a massive structure that had stood for 3,000 years, Representatives from 500 species gathered for an emergency session. At the center of the chamber, where normally only the most powerful species were allowed to speak, stood Ambassador Hyojin. She was young for an ambassador, barely 40 years old, but she carried herself with quiet confidence. Behind her, projected in hologram, floated images of the Nalith evacuation, ships packed beyond capacity, humans working themselves to exhaustion, entire colonies rationing food and water to help strangers. Emperor Vorthak of the Velcran Empire rose from his throne. His species was tall and covered in dark scales that glittered in the light. For centuries, the Velcrans had been the dominant military force in the galaxy. By what right? He demanded, his voice echoing through the chamber. Do humans interfere in the natural order of things? Species rise and fall. It is the way of the galaxy. It has always been the way. Hyojin looked up at the Emperor with calm eyes. The natural order? Is that what you call it when you let 3 billion people die because saving them is too expensive? When you sabotage rescue efforts because you fear what it means if they succeed? You dare accuse the Velcran Empire? I have proof, Hyojin said calmly. She gestured and new images appeared. Communication intercepts, financial records, testimony from captured pirates. Your empire spent more resources trying to make us fail than it would have cost to help us succeed. Why? Because you were afraid. Afraid? Vorthak laughed, a harsh sound. Of humans? You are children playing at civilization. No, Hyojin said. You were afraid of what it meant if we succeeded. Afraid that other species would see that there's another way to live, besides bowing to the strong. Afraid that your empire, built on the backs of those you've kept powerless, might crumble if they realized they didn't have to accept their place anymore. The chamber erupted in noise. Some species shouted agreement. Others called for order. The Velcran delegation looked ready to start a war right there in the council chamber. But it was another voice that cut through the chaos. Matriarch Esselin of the Thessian Concord stood, and when she spoke, everyone listened. The Thessians were even older than the Velcrans, their civilization stretching back 5,000 years. They were scholars, diplomats, the keepers of galactic law. When they spoke, the galaxy listened. I have watched this unfold with great interest, Esselin said, her voice carrying easily through the massive chamber, and with great shame. That caused another ripple of shock. The Thessian matriarch was known for her pride in her people's accomplishments. Shame was not a word anyone expected to hear from her. 5,000 years of recorded history, she continued. 5,000 years of law and order and stability. And in all that time, we have forgotten something essential. We have forgotten what honor means. We have forgotten that might does not make right. We have forgotten that the strong have a duty to protect, not exploit. She turned to look directly at Hyojin. The humans have reminded us. They have shown us that a debt of honor matters more than convenience or profit. That gratitude is not weakness, but strength. That civilization is measured not by how well we treat the powerful, but by how we treat the powerless. The Thessians stand with humanity, Esselin declared. We stand with the coalition of free worlds, and we will not permit the Velcran Empire or any other power to punish those who choose compassion over cruelty. The silence that followed was absolute. The Thessian Concord and the Velcran Empire had been allies for 2,000 years. That alliance had just shattered. Emperor Vorthak stood very still, his face unreadable. Then he spoke, and his voice was cold as the void. The Thessians choose the side of children and weaklings, so be it. The Velcran Empire will remind the galaxy why strength matters. We will mobilize our fleet. The coalition will disband, or it will be disbanded by force. Hyojin felt her heart race, but she kept her voice steady. Is that a threat of war, Emperor? It is a promise of order restored. Then let me make you a promise in return, Hyojin said. You can mobilize your fleets. You can mass your armies. You can threaten and bluster and try to frighten us. But you need to understand something about humans. She paused. We didn't save the Nalith because we thought it would be easy or safe or profitable. We saved them because it was right. And we will not abandon that principle because a bully threatens us. She gestured to the holographic images still floating in the chamber. Images of human colonies rationing food, of children going without so that Nalith refugees could have more, of engineers who worked until they collapsed because lives depended on them. Look at what we gave up to honor a debt. Look at what we sacrificed for people who couldn't offer us anything in return. Do you really think threats will make us back down? Do you think we fear your empire more than we value our honor? Heejin's voice grew stronger, more passionate. You taught the galaxy to be afraid, Emperor. You taught them that the only way to survive was to submit to the strong. You taught them that mercy was weakness and compassion was foolishness. Well, we're teaching them something different. We're teaching them that honor matters, that debts should be paid, that the powerful have a duty to protect, not dominate. And once people learn that lesson, once they see that there's another way to live, your empire's finished. Not because we'll destroy it, but because no one will fear you anymore. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some species cheered. Others shouted in anger. The Velcron delegation stormed out, scales rattling with rage. But Heejin noticed something else. The representatives from the smaller species, the ones who normally sat silent and terrified in the back of the chamber, were standing. They were looking at her with something like hope. After the session, Heejin found herself surrounded by delegates from dozens of minor species. The Kelhari, the Proxians, the Drayan, and many others she barely recognized. We want to join the coalition, a Kelhari delegate said. Formally, completely, we're tired of being afraid. The Velkrans will target you, Heejin warned. Join us and you become their enemies. We're already their victims, a Proxian replied. At least as your allies, we have a chance to be more than that. By the end of the day, 23 new species had petitioned to join the coalition of free worlds. Small species, poor species, the ones who had been ignored and exploited for centuries. Together, they represented nearly a third of the galaxy's population. On their homeworld, the Velkran military mobilized. 3,000 warships, the most powerful fleet in galactic history, gathered in formation. Emperor Vorthak stood in his command center and looked at the displays showing his forces. We will crush this rebellion, he told his admirals. We will remind the galaxy why the strong rule, and we will start by making an example of humanity. My lord, one admiral said carefully, the Thessian Concord has positioned their fleet to defend coalition space. If we attack, we'll be fighting them as well. Then we'll fight them. The Thessians have grown soft. They value their books and their laws more than power. We'll show them the cost of choosing weakness over strength. But even as he spoke, Vorthak felt something he had not experienced in his long reign. He felt doubt. The humans had accomplished the impossible once already. They had united species that had never cooperated before. They had turned the galaxy's attention to questions of honor and morality that had been forgotten for millennia. What if they did the impossible again? On Earth, President Kyung-soo met with his advisors in a secure bunker. The Velkran fleet was moving. War was coming, we can't win, his military chief said bluntly. Our fleet is strong, but the Velkrans outnumber us 3-1. Even with the Thessians and our coalition allies, we'll be lucky to survive the first engagement. Then we don't try to win militarily, Kyung-soo said. We win by making sure everyone is watching, by making sure the galaxy sees exactly what the Velkrans are willing to do to maintain their power. You want to use our deaths as propaganda? The chief asked, horrified. I want to make sure that if we die for something that matters. The Velkrans can destroy our fleets. They might even destroy our worlds, but they can't destroy the idea we represent. They can't kill hope. In the cargo hold of a transport ship somewhere in coalition space, Elder Bora sat with a group of young Nalith children. They were scared, having heard rumors of war. She told them stories to comfort them, old Nalith legends about heroes and courage. Will the humans die because of us? One child asked. Because they saved us? Bora was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, the humans are not dying for us. They're dying for something bigger. They're dying for the idea that kindness matters, that honor is real, that we should save each other when we can. She smiled at the children. And you know what? I don't think they're going to die at all. I've seen humans do impossible things before. I bet they have one more impossible. The rising tide 25 years had changed everything. The small colony ship that limped into port with the help of a battered freighter had become a story that every human child learned in school. The Nalith who had risked everything to save strangers had become legends, and humanity had exploded across the stars like a wildfire. President Kyung-soo stood in his office on Earth, looking at reports from over 200 human colonies. He had been 8 years old when the Perseverance nearly died. He remembered the cold, the fear, and the moment when a strange alien with blue-gray skin had given him a warm blanket and told him everything would be okay. That alien had been Yuri, Captain Bora's sister. Now he was president of the United Human Territories, and the news in front of him made his blood run cold. Nalitha Prime has 6 months, his science advisor said, pulling up images of the Nalith homeworld. Their star is dying faster than anyone predicted. 3 billion Nalith need to evacuate or they all die. What is the Galactic Council doing? Kyung-Soo asked, though he already suspected the answer. They convened yesterday. The Velcran Empire suggested the Nalith should have planned better. The Thessian Concord called a full evacuation economically unfeasible. They're offering to take 10,000 Nalith refugees. 10,000 out of 3 billion. Kyung-Soo felt rage building in his chest. 10,000. The mighty powers of the galaxy were willing to save less than 1% of an entire species because it was too expensive, too difficult, too much trouble. Get me Admiral J, he said quietly, and call an emergency session of the Assembly. We're going to need every ship we have. The United Human Assembly met an emergency session 6 hours later. Representatives from every human colony gathered, either in person or through hologram. Kyung-Soo stood before them and played a recording that most of them had never heard. It was Captain Hyunwoo's personal log, recorded in those desperate hours before the whisper wind arrived. The old captain's voice, hoarse with exhaustion and fear, filled the chamber. If we survive this, we owe everything to 7 strangers who chose mercy over convenience. I don't care what it costs. I don't care how long it takes. Humanity will remember this debt. We will not forget. The chamber was silent when the recording ended. Then Kyung-Soo spoke. Captain Hyunwoo died 8 years ago, but his vow lives on. The Nalith saved 3,000 of us when we had nothing to offer them. Now 3 billion Nalith are dying and the galaxy has turned its back. What do we do? The vote took less than 5 minutes. It was unanimous. Every single representative voted yes. Humanity would save the Nalith. All of them. Whatever it cost. Admiral J was a practical woman who had commanded warships in 3 border conflicts. She understood logistics, supply lines, and the brutal mathematics of moving people across space. When she saw the plan that her staff had drawn up, she almost laughed. "This is impossible," she said flatly. "Yes, ma'am," her chief of staff agreed. "But those are our orders." The plan was insane. Every available human ship would be mobilized. Military transports, colony vessels, cargo haulers, even private yachts. Massive new colony ships would be built in weeks instead of months. Every human colony had agreed to take Nalith refugees, even though it meant shortages and overcrowding. Resources meant for expansion would be diverted. The economy would take a hit that might last decades. All of this to save an alien species that had given them a blanket and some spare parts 25 years ago. Jay looked at her staff. "Then we better get started. We have 6 months to do the impossible." The galaxy watched with confusion and growing amazement as humanity mobilized. The Velcran Emperor Vorthok sat in his throne room and listened to reports about human ships gathering at Nalitha Prime. "How many ships?" he demanded. "Current count is over 1,500, my lord, and more arriving every day. They're stripping their own colonies to transport Nalith refugees." "Foolish," Vorthok said. "They're bankrupting themselves for a species that cannot even defend its own world. This is exactly why humans will never be more than a curiosity in galactic affairs. They're too emotional, too weak." But others watched with different eyes. In the halls of the Thessian Concord, Matriarch Esselin studied the same reports. Her species was ancient, 5,000 years of recorded history, and she had seen empires rise and fall. There was something in what the humans were doing that made her uneasy, or perhaps it was something they were remembering that her people had forgotten. On Nalitha Prime, Elder Bora stood in a plaza filled with frightened people. She was old now, her skin faded and marked with age spots. She had been captain of the Whisper Wind a lifetime ago. That ship was long gone, scrapped for parts. Most of her crew was dead. She had thought her time of adventure was over. Now she watched human ships fill the sky, great vessels descending to take her people away from their dying world. She did not understand. The Nalith had done so little. One act of kindness a quarter century in the past. Why were the humans doing this? Captain Sun Hee commanded one of the largest transports in the human fleet. She was young, confident, and carried herself with the easy authority of someone born to lead. She was also the granddaughter of Engineer Day, the man who had fought to keep the Perseverance alive long enough for rescue to arrive. She found Elder Bora in a processing center, trying to help organize the evacuation. The old Nalith moved slowly, her hands shaking, but her mind was still sharp. Elder Bora, son, he asked, approaching carefully. The old Nalith looked up. Her eyes were cloudy with age, but they widened with recognition. You're human. Yes, ma'am. My name is Sun He. My grandfather was Day, chief engineer on the Perseverance. Bora's hand went to her mouth. The colony ship. The one we saved. The one you saved, Sun He confirmed. We came to return the favor, but this is too much. We gave you some supplies, helped patch your ship. This, Bora gestured at the ships filling the sky. This is everything. You're sacrificing everything for us. Sun He knelt so she was at eye level with the seated elder. You came when no one else would. You risked your ship, your crew, your livelihood to save strangers. Did you think we would forget that? Did you think humans don't pay their debts? Tears ran down Bora's face. I didn't think anyone remembered. We're human, Sun He said softly. We remember everything. The evacuation continued through the months. It was not smooth. Ships broke down. Supplies ran short. There were accidents, deaths, and moments of despair, and through it all, certain forces worked to make it worse. Intelligence officer Min Seok discovered the pattern after weeks of investigation. Pirate raids on human convoys were too well coordinated. Supply lines were disrupted at exactly the wrong times. Propaganda spread through the galactic networks calling the Nalith parasites and the humans fools. It's the Velkrans, he reported to Admiral J. They're behind the attacks. They want us to fail. J studied the evidence and felt cold anger settle in her gut. The Velkran Empire, one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy, was actively sabotaging a humanitarian mission. They were willing to let 3 billion people die just to prove a point about human weakness. What do we do? Minsuk asked. Jay smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. We teach them that humans are not as weak as they think. The next convoy that was attacked by pirates found itself protected by a full battle group of human warships. The pirates, expecting easy prey, instead faced destroyers and cruisers with weapons hot and shields raised. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, the pirate ships were debris and the convoy continued on schedule. Admiral J broadcast a message on all frequencies. This is Admiral J of the United Human Fleet. The evacuation of Naletha Prime is under our protection. Any ship that interferes will be treated as hostile. We are not starting a war. We are simply making it clear that stopping us will cost more than anyone is willing to pay. The attack stopped. The Velkran Empire, confronted with human determination backed by force, decided that the point was not worth the price, and across the galaxy, other species watched and learned. The Kelhari, a small trading people, sent medical supplies. The Proxian Federation provided fuel. The Draen Collective offered temporary shelter on their border worlds. The powerless were finding their voice, and humanity was teaching them that they did not have to accept the way things had always been. As the third month passed, Admiral J looked at her fleet and marveled. She commanded over 3,000 ships now, from dozens of different species. What had started as a human mission to repay a debt had become something larger. It had become a movement. A revolution built on the simple idea that kindness deserved to be repaid, and that the strong had a duty to protect the weak. Emperor Vorthak watched from his throne and felt something he had not experienced in decades. He felt afraid. The dying light. The alarm bells screamed through every corridor of the colony ship Perseverance. Captain Hyun-woo gripped the edge of his command chair as another shudder ran through the massive vessel. 3,000 souls depended on him, and he was watching them die slowly in the cold darkness of space. Fusion Core 3 is completely dead, his chief engineer Day reported, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Core 4 is failing. We have maybe 70 hours before life support shuts down completely. Hyun-woo closed his eyes. 70 hours. Less than 3 days to live. The gravitational anomaly had appeared without warning, twisting space itself and tearing through their ship's propulsion systems like paper. Now they drifted helpless and alone, in a region of space that saw maybe one ship per year. Send the distress signal again, Hyun-woo ordered. All frequencies. Emergency protocols. Sir, we've been broadcasting for 18 hours, the communications officer said quietly. The Galactic Council Station received our transmission. They acknowledged it and then went silent. The words hit like a physical blow, acknowledged and went silent. That meant the council had heard their dying screams and chosen to do nothing. Yun-Woo had heard the stories about how the ancient civilizations treated newcomers like humanity. They were insects to them, primitives who had barely crawled into space 15 years ago. Not worth the effort of a rescue mission. He thought of the children in the colony section, families who had sold everything they owned for a chance at a new life on a distant world. Engineers, doctors, teachers, farmers, all of them about to become frozen corpses drifting in the void. "Keep broadcasting," he said, his voice hard. "Even if no one's listening, keep broadcasting." Down in the engineering section, Day stared at the ruined fusion cores with tears streaming down his face. His daughter was in the education wing, learning about the stars they would never reach. He had promised her mother, dead 3 years now, that he would keep their child safe, some promise that turned out to be. Meanwhile, in the medical bay, colony leader Ji-Won moved between the beds where the injured from the initial collision lay. She kept her face calm, professional, even as her mind raced through impossible calculations. How long before the oxygen ran thin? How long before the cold crept through the walls? How long before they had to start making choices about who got the remaining heat and air? She refused to think about it. There had to be another way. Far beyond the Perseverance, in a completely different region of space, a small freighter called Whisper Wind picked up a faint signal. The ship was old, patched together from a dozen different vessels, and it limped through space carrying a cargo of medical supplies and food supplements. Not valuable cargo, not the kind that rich ships fought over. Captain Bora, a Nalith female with blue-gray skin marked by years of hard work, frowned at her communications panel. Her species was small, barely noticed by the great powers of the galaxy. The Nalith traded in the margins, living quiet lives and avoiding attention. They had learned long ago that the strong ignored you at best and crushed you at worst. "What is that?" her sister Yuri asked, leaning over Bora's shoulder to peer at the display. "Distress call," Bora said slowly. "Human ship. Colony vessel." She pulled up the data and felt her heart sink. 3,000 people. Fusion cores failing. They're dying. Where are they? Bora checked the coordinates and felt a chill run through her. 3 days travel. We would have to burn through most of our fuel to get there and back. The bridge went quiet. The other 5 crew members of the Whisper Wind gathered around, reading the data for themselves. Young Taeyang, barely into adulthood, spoke first. "We have to help them." "We can't," said First Mate Kian, always the practical one. "We don't have the parts to fix a colony ship. We barely have enough supplies for ourselves. And even if we reach them, what then? We let them die," Taeyang shot back. "We're not rescue specialists," Kian insisted. "The Galactic Council has ships designed for this. Let them handle it." "The Council already knows," Bora said quietly, still staring at the display. "Look at the transmission log. They sent the distress call to the nearest Council station 20 hours ago. No response except an acknowledgement. The crew understood immediately. The Council had decided these humans were not worth saving. Too primitive, too new. Too much effort for too little return. Bora thought about that. 3,000 people. Families. Children. All of them choking to death in the darkness because they were not important enough to matter. She thought about her own people. The Nalith and how the galaxy treated them. Ignored, dismissed, barely tolerated. She thought about what it felt like to call for help and hear only silence in return. "Change course," she said. "Maximum speed. We're going to help them." "Captain," Kian started. "I know the risks." Bora cut him off. "I know we might not be able to do anything. I know this will cost us most of our fuel and parts. I know the cargo we're carrying will arrive late and we'll lose the contract. I know all of it." She turned to face her crew and her voice was steady as stone. "But 3,000 people are dying, and we can try to help them." "That's enough reason." The crew looked at each other. Then one by one they nodded. 3 days later, the Perseverance had 51 hours of life support remaining. The ship was cold now. People huddled in the corridors wearing every piece of clothing they owned. The children had stopped crying, which was somehow worse than when they had been screaming. Hyun-Woo sat in his command chair, broadcasting the distress signal into empty space, when his communications officer suddenly sat up straight. "Sir." "I'm getting a response!" "The Council?" Hope flared in Hyun-Woo's chest. "No, sir. It's a small freighter. Nalith Registry. They're saying they're 3 hours out and they're coming to help." Hyun-Woo felt something break inside him, a dam of tension he had been holding back for days. A freighter? Just one ship? Yes, sir. Captain Bora of the Whisper Wind. She says they have supplies and an engineer who might be able to help with the fusion cores. It was not much, a tiny freighter against the massive damage to their ship. But it was something. It was more than the silent void had offered. Tell them. Hyun-woo had to stop and clear his throat. Tell them we're grateful. Tell them we're waiting. When the Whisper Wind finally appeared on their sensors, limping and old and smaller than any of the Perseverance's shuttlecraft, Hyun-woo felt tears on his face. Someone had come. Someone had heard them screaming and had come running. In the cold darkness of space, 7 strangers on a broken freighter were about to save 3,000 lives. They had no idea they were also about to change the entire galaxy. The last Exodus 3 weeks remained before Nalletha Prime would die. The star that had warmed the Naleth homeworld for 15,000 years was collapsing into instability, and nothing could stop it. In orbit above the doomed planet, Admiral J looked at numbers that made her want to scream. 92% evacuated. 2.76 billion Naleth saved and scattered across hundreds of worlds. By any measure, it was the greatest rescue operation in galactic history. It was not enough. 500 million Naleth remained on the surface. Most were elderly, their bodies too frail for the stress of space travel in cramped conditions. Others were sick, requiring medical care that the evacuation transport simply could not provide. Some were volunteers who had stayed behind to help others evacuate, knowing their own chances grew slimmer with each passing day. The mathematics were brutal. There were not enough ships, not enough time, not enough resources. We need to make a choice, Jay's second-in-command said quietly. We can evacuate the youngest and healthiest of who's left, maybe get another 100 million off-world. Or we can try to save everyone and risk losing ships to the stellar expansion. We could end up killing the people already on board. Jay knew he was right. It was the logical choice. Save who you could and accept the losses. War had taught her that lesson over and over. Sometimes the only choice was between bad and worse. She thought about a conversation she had once with President Kyung-soo. He had told her about being a child on the Perseverance, about the moment when Captain Bora had looked at impossible odds and decided to try anyway. Get me a channel to the Naleth Council of Elders, Jay said. On the surface of Nalletha Prime, in a shelter that had once been a government building, the Council of Elders gathered for what everyone knew would be their final meeting. Elder Bora sat in a chair that had been carried in for her ancient body barely strong enough to sit upright. The humans have done more than we ever dreamed possible, Council Leader Than said heavily. They have saved our species. The young ones are safe. Our culture will continue. We should be grateful. But 500 million of us will die, another elder said quietly. Yes, Than agreed. We will die. Those of us too old, too sick, too slow. We will stay behind so that our children can live. It's the right choice, is it? Bora asked, her voice thin but clear. Or is it just the practical choice? Are they not the same thing? No, Bora said. 25 years ago, the practical choice was to ignore a human distress call. To save our fuel and our supplies and our time for ourselves. The practical choice would have let 3,000 humans die in the cold darkness. But I didn't make the practical choice. I made the right choice. And because of that, billions of our people are alive today. The room fell silent. Then Than spoke again, and there were tears in his eyes. What would you have us do, old friend? Ask the humans to risk more. They have given everything already. We cannot ask them to give their lives as well. I'm not asking them for anything, Bora said. But I think if we asked, they would give it anyway. Because that's who they are. Admiral J's face appeared on the holographic display. The elders straightened, showing respect to the human who had worked miracles for their people. Admiral, Than said, we wanted to thank you before the end. You and your people have saved our species. We know that not everyone can be evacuated. We accept this. Those of us who remain will die knowing that our sacrifice meant our children live. We ask only that you tell our story, so that we are not forgotten. Jay listened to this speech, which had clearly been prepared and practiced. When it ended, she smiled, a fierce, determined expression that made some of the elders lean back in surprise. With the deepest respect, Council Leader, that's not how humans do things, she said. We don't leave people behind. Not when there's breath in our bodies and fuel in our ships. But the numbers. I've seen the numbers. I've done the calculations. You're right that with our current capacity, we can't evacuate everyone. Jay leaned forward. So we're going to change our capacity. We're going to break every safety regulation ever written. We're going to push our ships past their limits. We're going to cram people into cargo holds, fighter bays, maintenance tunnels, anywhere with air and heat. It's going to be dangerous. People might die, but they'll die trying to escape, not waiting to burn. Elder Bora felt her heart's race. You would risk everything? After all you've already done? Elder Bora, my grandfather was 8 years old on the Perseverance. He's gone now, but before he died, he told me stories about a Nalith named Yuri, who gave him a blanket and hot soup when he was freezing. He said she sang him songs from her world so he wouldn't be afraid. Jay's voice softened. You risked everything for strangers. Did you really think we would do less? Chief Engineer Wanshik had not slept in 4 days. He stood in the main hangar of the flagship, surrounded by his team, and explained a plan that sounded like insanity. We're going to strip out everything non-essential from every ship. Crew quarters, recreation areas, storage, all of it. We'll replace it with basic life support and as many people as we can physically fit. He pulled up schematics. A ship rated for 500 passengers will carry 1,500. A cargo hauler will carry 10,000 instead of freight. Sir, that's insane, one of his engineers said. The life support systems aren't designed for that load. The air recyclers will fail. The heat distribution will be uneven. People could suffocate, could freeze. I know, Wanshik said. That's why we're not going to use normal life support. We're going to network every ship together, creating a shared atmosphere system across the entire fleet. The big military vessels have excess capacity. We'll pipe their air and heat to the smaller ships. It's never been done before, but the theory is sound. Theory, another engineer repeated. Sir, if one connection fails, entire ships could lose air in minutes. Then we better not let any connections fail. Wanshik smiled, and it was the expression of a man who had already decided to attempt the impossible. We have 3 weeks to completely reconfigure 3,000 ships. I suggest we stop talking and start working. The word spread across the fleet. They were going to try to save everyone. The response was immediate. Civilian ships volunteered to be converted. Military crews worked around the clock. Engineers who had been awake for days kept going through sheer determination. And on Naletha Prime, hope kindled in hearts that had accepted death. Captain Sun-hee oversaw the conversion of her transport personally. She watched as crews ripped out the walls of passenger cabins, creating huge open spaces. Bunks were stacked 6 high. Life support conduits were run through hallways. We're turning this ship into a flying coffin, her first officer said quietly. If anything goes wrong during the journey, then we fix it, Sun-hee cut him off. You think the Whisper Wind was safe when Captain Bora pushed it to maximum burn to reach the Perseverance? Safety is a luxury we can't afford right now. The conversions took 17 days. On Naletha Prime, every remaining Nalith was mobilized. The elderly were carried to shuttles. The sick were moved on stretchers. Volunteers worked until they collapsed, then kept working. Elder Bora refused to board until she had personally seen the last Nalith besides herself loaded onto a transport. Sun-hee found her in an empty plaza, the last living soul on the surface besides the evacuation crews. Come on, Elder, Sun-hee said gently. Time to go. I never thought I would leave, Bora said, looking up at the sky where Naletha Prime's star flickered with dangerous instability. This is my world, 15,000 years of my people's history, and we're abandoning it. You're not abandoning anything. You're surviving. There's no shame in that. Will they remember? Bora asked. In 100 years, will anyone remember that there was a world called Naletha Prime, where the Nalith people were born? Sun-hee knelt beside the old Nalith's wheelchair. Elder, humans still remember things that happened thousands of years ago. We remember ancient battles, old songs, the names of people who did brave things before we even had writing. You really think we're going to forget the world where our saviors came from? She smiled. We're going to make sure the entire galaxy remembers Naletha Prime. We're going to tell this story until the stars go cold. Bora reached out and took Sun-hee's hand. Your grandfather Day would be proud of you. Captain Bora of the Whisper Wind would be proud of you too. They lifted off from Naletha Prime with 6 hours to spare. The last shuttle to leave carried Elder Bora, Sun-hee, and 3 Nalith children, who had gotten separated from their families in the chaos. Sun-hee held them while they cried, promising them everything would be okay. The fleet gathered in high orbit, more than 4,000 ships linked together in a network of life support systems that should not have worked. but did. Inside them, packed beyond any reasonable safety limit, were 3 billion Nalith, every single one. Not a soul left behind. Admiral J stood on her bridge and looked at the readings. The strain on the systems was enormous. They had maybe 72 hours before things started failing. The nearest safe harbor was 68 hours away. It was going to be close. "All ships report ready," her communications officer said. "Then let's get these people home," Jay ordered. As the fleet began to move, Naletha Prime's star entered its death throes behind them.